It was a show trial to end all show trials, only the defendant, Donald Trump, was in absentia. Michael Cohen, former lawyer for Donald Trump, convicted liar, ready to spend 3 years in the slammer, seemingly the opposite of a credible witness. In fact, perhaps the least credible witness I have personally ever seen testify before Congress, was brought before a House committee to respond to virtually every allegation made against Trump over the years, a clear opportunity for the Democrats to again demonstrate how far they'll go to take down this president. And they deliberately held the hearing just as the president was meeting with the North Korean leader trying to get a deal to make the world safer, if only by a bit, proving once again the Democrats care far more about kneecapping Trump than anything else, including national security. That all said, did this amount to something, nothing, or somewhere in between? Was there actually anything new in this hearing? Joining us to analyze is LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza, who wrote an excellent piece on LibertyNation.com in which he decried how a lawyer like Cohen would willingly violate the relationship with his client, violate attorney-client privilege, and rat out his client. So, Scott, jump in here. What say you?
Well, the attorney-client privilege is a privilege that a client can assert in a proceeding against him to say, well, you can't introduce evidence against me. This goes beyond that, and it's more of a professional duty and an ethical obligation that we have as attorneys to not violate the confidences of our clients, and that's why they hire us. If we wouldn't keep their confidences, they wouldn't pay us, the high wages that attorneys make, and so. I think it's really odious. And I just can't believe that he did it, Tim. It's one thing if he was under threat of compulsion or something like that, which while I don't think would be great, is forgivable. But that's not what we have here. This is just Michael Cohen. It seems like at the beck and call of Lanny Davis in a move to try and eliminate Donald Trump because Hillary Clinton was supposed to be president and Donald Trump is now.
If you listen to his closing statement, which I know you did, Scott, that could have been written by Hillary Clinton. I mean, and Lanny Davis is his lawyer, and Lanny Davis is an old-time, big-time friend of the Clintons. I mean, he's saying he's afraid that Donald Trump won't turn over the reins of power if he loses the 2020 election.
How horrible that was. The idea that Trump is somehow prepared to move into some Maduro-like despotic position in the United States is a laugh track if it weren't being played out in the halls of Congress, Tim.
Well, now that Russian collusion appears to be out the window by most all accounts, they've now moved on to financial fraud, whatever it takes, Scott. So what did they get, if anything, on financial fraud that the special prosecutor in the Southern District of New York don't already have?
Well, we learned some facts through the presentation at the hearing yesterday that certainly those prosecutors already know, but they weren't publicly disclosed. Michael Cohen detailed the inflation of value of properties for some insurance purposes and deflation for perhaps tax purposes. Basically, some fudging of numbers to increase profits, it seems like. It all seemed relatively minor, yet perhaps criminal. So we'll see about that. And the other thing, Tim, is Michael Cohen, and this was drawn out by Eleanor Holmes Norton, the Washington, D.C. rep who does not have a vote in Congress, but she does have a seat on the committee. And she drilled down onto Trump's motivation for the Stormy Daniels payment. You'll remember we've spoken on this program before. It's Trump's own motivations which may or may not make that payment a criminal violation, or not, maybe not, criminal violation of the nation's campaign finance rules.
Scott, there's an expression in legal circles based on an important Supreme Court decision, which refers to prurient interest, and it seemed to me that was the catchword for what the Democrats were doing. They picked every unflattering story, it seemed, from here back to what, 10 years ago. And it seemed like
or longer.
they divided that up among the Democratic members of the committee. You know, they brought up the Moscow hotel, the elevator videos, a love child. I mean, nothing
Hmm.
was beneath the dignity of the people running this committee. Or am I overstating it?
Oh, you're understating it. I thought the most odious part was the insulting of Donald Trump Jr. And a line that where Trump in an episode of frustration, insulted his judgment to Michael Cohen, and he made sure to relay that before the committee, as if that's somehow a proper a proper place to examine, the relay. I mean, it's just beyond the pale, Tim. Honestly, it was just 7.5 or 8 hours of craziness. I called my story a dumpster fire on the Hill for a reason. I thought it resembled that on multiple fronts.
Yeah, that was the best description that I'd heard of it. What does it say about Michael Cohen that he's describing all these things that he did, these dirty deeds that he did for Trump over the years? They asked him, how many times uh, did he ask you
Oh,
to
right. Yeah. Let me. So how
threaten
many?
somebody? And they did, like it was like an auction. Do I hear
Yes.
50? Do I hear 50? No. Do I hear 100? Do I hear 200?
Yeah. And
I
by the
mean,
way, they breezed through threat. Like, I think that, I saw an ABC News presentation this morning, Tim, online, that said that, the takeaway or highlights from the Cohen hearing. And they breeze through the fact that the threats are legal threats, as in, if you release these things that are supposed to be private, I will
right.
sue you or I will do this. Not, we're going to send people over to break your legs, which I think it had the sort of veneer of that as they were going
Yes.
on about it.
Yeah, no question. But I mean, here's Cohen, who did all these things for all these years, all these terrible things, according to him. And now he's convicted of lying to Congress, lying to investigators. He's going to jail for 3 years, and he appears before the committee. And we're supposed to believe that he's has even a shred of credibility. I mean, the Democrats have engaged in wishful thinking about it. They've said, "Oh, I think he was a rather credible witness." I
Well,
mean,
I think that most people lie from time to time, and about important things from time to time. I think that's true for the president. I think that's true for Mr. Cohen. And it's a tough thing to sort of grant somebody a sort of a general credibility or general incredibility. It's important to examine the motivations for all these statements. But one thing I want to say, Tim, is there seems to be a potential, and I haven't investigated this fully yet, but for Michael Cohen to be charged again with perjury. And this has to do with his statements to the committee that he was
mhm,
not interested in a job
mhm,
in the White House.
right.
Republicans brought forth this idea as because under the theory that this is sour grapes, which is to say that Michael Cohen wanted a esteemed position in the White House. He was denied that position, and part of this is sort of a revenge play. He adamantly disputed that, said he did not want at any time a job in the White House, and that was then refuted by a number of people. So there's a potential for more criminal charges coming his way.
Oh, so let's talk about where things go from here. By most accounts, the Mueller report is going to be coming out presently, shortly, in the next week, month, something like that. I mean, we don't necessarily have any proof of that, but the indications are that it will. But when the Mueller report is out, we've still got the Southern District of New York, which is independent from the special counsel. So, what liability might Trump have in terms of any investigations from the Southern District of New York?
Oh, it's a hodgepodge. You talked about the financial crimes, and that was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's moment in the sun before the committee, and she didn't say anything particularly wacky. She went into that valuation, so there's potential criminality there. And if you know how these things work, it would be a crime, a fraud crime with potential with the government and insurance companies. Not to mention, if somebody signed that paper and put it in the mail, you've got mail fraud. So there are multiple criminal possibilities.
They still haven't accepted the fact that Donald Trump got over 60 million votes and was duly elected by the American people, and they're going to prove it in any way they can. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Tim.
This program, Liberty Nation Radio Plus, LibertyNation.com's own podcast, The Uprising, hosted by Scott, and occasionally Lisa K. Donner and me will join him. All available on demand at LibertyNation.com and from fine podcast providers everywhere. So that is it for this week, but we'll be back at you next week, same time, same station. Till then, this is Tim Donner saying, stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.